Hi, everybody. This is Mrs. Prosser. Today, I'm going to take you through lesson 11 on conditionals. Now, I will say I think this is one of the more difficult lessons, but this is where things get really fun. So, conditionals are statements where you're saying, okay, if this is going on, then do this. So, it's conditional based upon something happening. Now, the reason this is so cool is because you can do things like say, if the right arrow key is pressed down, then move the character to the right. So this is where you get into interactive elements. So conditionals are really awesome. You just have to kind of learn the basics. So let's go through this. The key vocabulary word you're going to be hearing over and over in this lesson or reading will be booleans. Booleans, it sounds confusing, but it's just a true-false statement. So a boolean statement or a boolean expression is just a true-false statement. And you're familiar with true or false. There's lots of those questions on quizzes and tests. So we're going to go through some of this. Let's go to continue. Here's the deal. This is going to ask you, okay, predict what this is going to read out. Now, there's some weird things here. You'll see there's an equals sign. So ignoring some of this and ignoring this console.log stuff, if we take a look here, it's saying, okay, sprite1y is equal, and that the double equals means is it equal, not it. If you have one equal sign, you're setting it to be equal. If you have two equal signs, you're saying is it equal. So is sprite 1y's position equal to sprite 2's y position? Well, if we take a look, sprite 1 and 2 are here. The y positions are both 200, so that would be true. This is equal to this. Then the next one is sprite 1's x position greater than sprite 2's x position? So let's see, sprite 1 is 100 for x, sprite 2 is 300. So sprite 1 is actually less than, so it would be false, saying sprite x or 1's x position is not greater than sprite 2's x position. So that is false. This statement's false. And then here, this last one, sprite 1, its x position is less than sprite 2's y position. So is 100 less than 200? Yes, that's true. So what we're going to see down here in the debug console, because basically this code here is saying, okay, these things are going to show up in the console. It basically helps you check to see if things are going right or not. So we should see true, false, true. So true, false, true. Let's see, run. Now this doesn't matter. We're checking down here. Does the code show down here true, false, true? This is showing, okay, this is what the code is doing based on these console logs. All it's doing over here is drawing those two sprites. That is, you set up the sprites and then we're drawing the sprites. That's all there is to it. This is a little confusing. It makes more sense as you practice. Really, that's the case with all coding and a lot of things you do in classes. So let's go on. And there's a video to watch. Watch the video. It will help you understand more about what a Boolean expression is and would something be true or false. So I'm going to go continue. Now, there's a lot of stuff here. Don't freak out. We're going to see, it says, can you modify the values of the sprite properties? So down here, we want all of these to evaluate to be true. So these are all Boolean expressions. We're seeing, okay, we want all of these to be true. So let's take a look. If we look up here, we've got sprite 1 and sprite 2, and we have the positions. The first one's 100, 200. The second one, x is 300, y is 200. So now, this is where we get into, okay, we want all of them to be true. Now, Here's the deal. Specifically says don't edit the following. That means we're going to be editing things up here and not down here. So let's take a look at this. Sprite 2, we'll go through a couple of these and you can do the rest. Sprite 2, well, actually, let's run it first to start. So if we look down here on the console, all of these statements are false so far. So let's do a couple together. Sprite 2x is equal to sprite 2y. Are they equal? Well, sprite 2x and sprite 2y. Well, right now they're not equal. 300 is not equal to 200. So let's change this to 200. Now they're both equal, so this should be true. They're both equal. So let's rerun it. And now we see down here, comparison 1 is true. Let's go to the next one. It says sprite 2's rotation is less than 40. Well, let's go take a look. Sprite 2's rotation is set to 60 right now. So it's going to be false. 60 is not less than 40. So a number that's less than 40, 30. Now, it basically is saying, is 30 less than 40? Yes, that is true. So now if I rerun, the first two statements are true. Let's do one more together. Is the scale of sprite 1 equal to the scale of sprite 2? Is that true or false? Are they equal? Let's take a look. So we want the scale to be equal. This scale is 1.5. This is 0.5. I'll set this one to 1.5. Now it's saying 1.5 is equal to 1.5. Is that true? Yes. So now, if we restart, we'll have 3 true statements. Anyway, you can do the last couple, take a look, and you want these to be true. So you're changing sprite 1's x value and sprite 2's y value so that these two statements are true. Now you have to be careful because the first statement here also uses the x and y value of, let's see, sprite 2's x value and sprite 2's y value. So this last one is also used in the first one. So you might have to change a couple things to make sure they're all true. Anyway, Boolean expressions, it's just, are they true or false? And that's what it gives you, true or false. And when we're looking here at the console log, the place we're seeing the true false is down here in the console. This is not really part of the program. This is not what you see. This is just for the coder to check, okay, is my program working right? So let's go on. I'm going to skip 5 and just go to 6. And yeah, because 5 you can do. Now, let's see. And 5 is nice. It'll tell you what's right and wrong. So this is going to be a larger project. So it says this program draws a race car and a finish line. We are going to figure out when the race car crosses the finish line. The sprites have been set up for you. Okay, so we don't have to deal with making the sprites. Let's take a look at the program. Let's run it right now. So we see the car goes from right to left and crosses the finish line. Okay, so what do we have to do? It says add a console log statement inside the draw loop. Okay, so let's start with that. Here's the console log statement. Here's the draw loop. Let's go ahead and add that in here. Okay. Then it says add a Boolean expression, that's a true-false statement, inside the console log statement that we just did that asks, is the x position of the race car less than the x position of the finish line? Okay, so now we're going to go in here, and here we have less than. So we're saying, is it less than? So we need the less than. And we're saying, is the x position of the race car less than the x position of the finish line? So let's go look. We have finish line and race car as our two variables. So let's go to the variables, and we're going to say, oh no, we want sprites. I'm sorry, we'll go to sprite. So we're looking at the x positions. So we'll start with this one. is the x position of the race car less than the x position of the finish line? And finish line is finish line. Always look out for those capitals. If you don't put the capitals in the right place, it's not going to work. Now, look at the output. What changes? So let's reset and run it. And what we'll see down here is it's going to keep saying false, 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 false until, once the car crosses the edge of the finish line over here on the left, it changes to true. So it's basically checking in the console over and over, is this statement that we added in true or false? And then it changes to true once it's true. Now, you might be thinking, why should we care about this console log? Well, we really shouldn't, honestly. It's not going to do anything for us. It's just showing, is that statement true or false? Now, we want to do something more with that statement than just check if it's true or false. So let's move on. And this is another console log statement. You're checking, it's going to show down here if it's true or false. I'm going to skip this. I kind of feel like these are the boring things, just having it in the console, because it's so much more fun when you say, okay, if this is true, then do this. That's the fun part. So this is just checking and practicing true, false. So let's move on. If you go to 8, it's going to give you some extra information. This one's interesting. The exclamation point in front here is checking, okay, is this not equal? And sometimes that's what you want to check for. It's a little weird. Then we've got greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, and less than or equal to. You can look over this. It shows some examples. Let's move on, though. And there's a video that kind of goes over this stuff, and specifically the next part, if statements. This is the fun part, I think. So let's look at these if statements. An if statement is where you'd use a boolean to actually say, okay, if it's true, do this. So let's take a look at that. This says a race car program. Okay, here's the race car program, right? And we have it checking if it's true or false, right? So now we're going to add an if statement after you update the position of the race car. And we're going to move the Boolean expression from this console log to the condition of the if statement. So let's start with the first step. First bullet point says add an if statement. If statements are control statements because you're saying if you do this, then do this. Or if this is true, then do this. So if statement's going to go, it says after you update the position. So this is updating the position. Here's my if statement. Now, you're saying if this is true. So we're adding, for second step here, we're adding this Boolean expression here. Instead of checking it, we're going to use it. So I'm going to drag it in here. And this is now saying if this is true, then do whatever is inside the if statement. So in this case, we want it to be inside the if statement to basically draw text on the screen that says winner. So let's go ahead and go to drawing. Let's add text. There it is. And we'll say we want it to say winner. And I'm going to just stick it in the middle of the screen, so about 200, 200. We don't need this console log anymore. I'm just going to drag it and get rid of it. And now let's run it. And what should happen is when the car reaches the edge over here, it should say winner. Excellent. That is what we wanted. Now you can play with this, make the text bigger and everything. But the key is we're saying check every time this loop goes, check to see if basically if the race car has passed the finish line's X value. Once it does that, to display winner. And it's going to keep checking this over and over in this loop. And it will keep redrawing winner every time. And remember, we don't see that. We see that winner just stays there, but it's actually redrawing that like 30 times per second or something like that, depending on what you set it to. All right, so you're maybe thinking, okay, I don't care if it says winner, that's not the most exciting thing. Well, you can do other things. So changing the fruit, now that you know how to use an if statement, you're going to check in this one if the apple has reached the scale of 2. You can turn it then into a pear once this happens. So instead of just showing text, you can actually change the sprites. That's another thing you can do with an if statement. So let's go ahead, use the conditional in the draw loop to check whether fruit scale is greater than 2. If it is, you're going to change the animation. So you can also do this, make the fruit stop growing once it turns into a pear, which is kind of cool too. First off, we need an if statement. So after it changes the value, we're checking, okay, is it now greater than 2? So we're looking at the scale of the fruit. So let's take a look. We're going to go here and we're saying, is it, oh no, not equal, is it greater than 2? So we're saying if, specifically, is fruit scale greater than 2? Sprites, scale, and there we go. Is it greater than 2? And then remember, we have to rename this. This is showing, hey, we don't have a sprite named sprite. We have a sprite named fruit. So I got to make sure I change the name to fruit. And now I got to say, what's it going to do now that it's greater than 2? What do I want it to do? And again, here, I want to change the animation to a pear. So you would then go and use your set animation and you'd add that in. And the nice thing is you'll see pear is already there. So you don't need to create an additional animation. I'll let you do that. Try running it. What's cool is it'll see it keep growing and growing. And then once it reaches a certain point, it'll turn into a pear. Yeah. And then see if you can do the challenge. The challenge is kind of fun. Can you make it stop growing? What do you do to make it stop growing? And that requires, there's a couple ways to do it. This is one way that I like to do it, which is if you hit the plus sign, you can make an else statement. And you'll learn more about that in the next lesson. But basically you're saying, okay, if it's greater than 2, do this. If not, else do this. So if you think about it, you might say, okay, if it's greater than 2, set it to this animation and you can just not have a growing thing in there. And then maybe otherwise you would set it to keep growing. So this would maybe go in the else statement. If that's confusing, you can try it. You don't have to. That's just the challenge. But see if you can go through and finish the if statement here so that it changes into a pear. I'm going to stop there. This video kind of walked you through everything in detail. So you should be able to get through this lesson for sure. But the next lesson, I think, is where this gets more fun, where you do more if statements. So we'll get to that next. You're welcome to watch the next video or jump into the next lesson. The next lesson is shorter, by the way. Anyway, take care, everybody.